This series of training videos is brought to you by the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency and the Irrigation Training and Research Center of Cal Poly State University San Luis Obispo in order to assist growers with a new Irrigation Allocation Index program. This video will discuss the results of the ITRC evaluation of weather stations located within the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency's area. We will go over the locations of CIMIS weather stations in the area, as well as their maintenance and quality control status. ITRC also evaluated the weather stations run by the GMA, and several strengths and weaknesses were identified. Finally, this video will go over some of the recommendations made by the ITRC for the use of the weather stations. CIMIS stands for the California Irrigation Management Information System. The California Department of Water Resources operates and maintains a series of weather stations throughout the state. Hourly quality-controlled data from each station is sent to a centralized office in Sacramento once per day and made freely available to the public. 3 operating CIMIS stations are currently located within or near the GMA area: the Oxnard, Camarillo, and Santa Paula stations. Here are photos of 2 of the CIMIS stations within the GMA, Camarillo and Santa Paula. These stations are examples of good site conditions, with no trees or buildings located within a specified distance of the station, and there is plenty of well-maintained grass around the equipment. In optimal conditions, the grass should be growing both around and under the equipment like it is at the Santa Paula station. Each site contains multiple pieces of equipment that gather data on key weather parameters. One key parameter measured by these stations is solar radiation. All of the data is gathered together and used to calculate the grass reference evapotranspiration, or ETO, value. This ETO value is the basis of crop evapotranspiration estimation, which is the basic foundation of the irrigation allowance computations. ETO is computed from local weather parameters for a standard crop, which is usually grass. Because the accuracy of this value is so important for irrigation scheduling purposes, stations must be specifically sited and very well maintained to prevent any extraneous conditions from affecting the data's accuracy. Here we see photos of 2 of the weather stations that were set up and operated by GMA over the past several years. Unfortunately, these pictures can be used as examples of how not to set up a weather station. These stations have interference from trees, are situated beside roads, and are not located within a grassy area. Here are 3 more station examples: Camarillo Airport, Edding Road, and Moore Park. These stations are also not ideal, but they are better than the 2 we just saw previously. ITRC evaluated the GMA-run weather stations and identified a number of strengths and weaknesses. In their favor, the GMA set up and has operated numerous sites for a number of years. Only one organization was involved in the maintenance of the units, so there was a relative continuity in how the data was collected and how the information was posted. On the other hand, the solar radiation values collected by the stations were not correct. Also, changes had been made to the formulas used to calculate ETO, without much explanation as to why. As mentioned, ITRC identified key problems with the solar radiation data at all 5 of the GMA-run stations. The data has improved since new stations were installed in 2006. Even the CIMIS station solar radiation data had some problems, but not as significant as at the GMA stations. This graph is an example of solar radiation curves over the course of 5 years at a single weather station. The solid line indicates what the maximum potential solar radiation should be on a clear day. The dots represent the actual measurements from the station. As you can see, the data did not match up very closely and had to be adjusted. Some people might say that the data was skewed by a lot of foggy days, but those are actually represented by the dots that are well below the average. the maximum values should track a lot more closely with the solid line. This chart shows the differences between the reported values and the recomputed values after corrections were made to faulty data. As you can see, the data from 2000 to 2002 required some major corrections. Once the new stations were installed in 2006, the improvements were significant. One important category of data required for the new FCGMA allowance program is rainfall. Allowance values are set based on whether it has been a typical rainfall year, a dry year, or a wet year. A dry year is one that has experienced less than 11 inches of rainfall. A wet year is one with more than 17 inches. A typical year falls in between 11 and 17 inches. The GMA will review the rainfall data from the CIMIS sites and make an evaluation at the end of each calendar year as to what type of a rainfall year it is. This graph shows how the rainfall data is used in a computer model in order to make a year type selection. The chart is broken into dry, typical, and wet year boundaries. The horizontal axis shows the annual precipitation in inches, and the vertical axis shows the modeled effective precipitation. Effective precipitation basically means how much usable water was actually received by different types of plants when it rains. For example, a mature avocado crop has approximately 70% ground cover. Let's look at a mature avocado crop in a year with 5 inches of rainfall, which would be considered a dry year. For 5 inches of rainfall, there was approximately 5 inches of effective precipitation, which means that nearly 100% of the water that came down as precipitation was used by the crop. On the other extreme, in a very wet year with 25 inches of rainfall, that equated to less than 12 inches of effective precipitation for avocado, meaning over half of the water either became runoff or wasn't effectively used by the tree. This is why the amount of rainfall that occurs affects the allocated water values for that year. To summarize, this video has addressed the evaluation of the CIMIS and GMA weather stations within the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency service area. As a result of the evaluation, ITRC has made a number of recommendations, including that the GMA stations be abandoned and the CIMIS stations used for the allowance program's data. Additionally, the new allowance program should take into account the rainfall year type. This concludes this video for the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency's Irrigation Efficiency Program. Thank you for taking the time to go through the material. If you have any further questions, please contact the staff at the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency.